All right. Well, welcome. I appreciate you being here with us today. Today we're going to be talking about professionalism. Again, thank you for joining me. It's been a long day, I'm sure. It's my honor and privilege to be with you virtually here today. My name is Joseph Llewellyn. I am your neighbor from the South, from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I've served at the Tulsa Housing Authority off and on now for nearly 20 years in several capacities. So again, I'm excited to share some things with you today. I have a shameless plug before we get into this. I believe that everybody should have an opportunity to have training. And I believe that training helps to inspire, to encourage, and recharge you. And so I would love to provide that kind of training for you, for your group, church, organization, doing it in person. I will have information for you that you can contact me with my email address. So feel free to email me at the very end, and I'll send you a digital brochure of the classes, the costs, and so forth. For some of you housing authorities that are smaller, you may be able to join together and absorb the costs. Or if not, again, shoot me an email, we'll talk about it. Also, if you would purchase my book, Why I Smile, One Christian's Journey, from my publisher, exlibris.com, a portion of the proceeds from my book and also from the speaking engagements goes towards helping at-risk athletes and single moms. So that's a way for me to generate funds and put it back into my community. So again, I appreciate that, and I'll again have that information for you at the end of this presentation. So again, thank you so much. I'm excited. Now, before we jump into this training, I have some training expectations that I'd like to share with you. I have I wills, you must, and you have the right to, okay? So I will use sports analogies from time to time. I will use stories, personal examples, but it's up to you to apply those principles. Chinese philosopher, he once said, what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. But what I do, I understand. So I'm going to ask you to press in. I know it's late in the day, but press in and get this information. Training is much like, have you heard of an old song that you really enjoyed maybe 10 years ago? And when that beat comes on, you really start to pop in with it. But today, when you hear that same song and you listen closely to the words, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was listening to that. Training is much the same way. You may hear the same thing over and over, but from time to time, you'll start to get nuggets of things that you didn't realize before. So again, press in. You must adjust your screen however you want to do that. I don't need to be the giant head and the small, presentation. Adjust it to where you feel comfortable. And also, you must have fun and try to learn at least one new thing today, okay? And then you have the right to. You have the right to, I know it's virtual, but nod, dance in place, cheer if you agree with something that I'm saying, because once you start to move as you're getting information, you'll remember more things, okay? So, with that being said, we'll start off with a story. An elderly carpenter was planning to retire, and he told his employer of his plans that he was going to leave the building business and live a more leisurely life with his family. His employer was sorry to see him go. It was one of his best and loyal workers, and he asked if he would do just one more house as a personal favor. Of course, the carpenter agreed, but in time, it was easy to see that his heart was not in his work. He resorted to poor workmanship. He cut corners, used inferior materials, and unfortunately, it was a bad way to end his career. When the carpenter finished the house, he went to his employer to have him inspect. And when he inspected, he brought him the keys and handed them to the carpenter, and he said, "This house is yours." What a shock and what a shame. If he had only known that that gift was going to be for him, he would have not cut the corners and he would have done everything as he was supposed to. So what is it with us? We build our lives in a distracted way. We react rather than act, willing to put up with less than our best. Then we're shocked when we look at the situation that we find ourselves in. So think of yourself as this carpenter. You're building a house. Each day you hammer a nail, you place a board, and you put up walls. So build wisely. Okay? All right. So, professionalism. When we talk about professionalism, again, all of you are professionals. You've done all these things before. But again, try to press in and get some nuggets from this. This topic is so broad that I had to find smaller trainings to fill in this umbrella. So as we talk about professionalism, there are 3 subcategories that we'll talk about today: etiquette, integrity, and ethics. So one would think that common sense would be played kind of in this universal talk of professionalism, but it's not true. Common sense is common to that demographic group who hears that information. Just like things that are common for me here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, will not be common for you in Kansas. No matter what you were taught, it's up to us to create change. Our backgrounds and circumstances may have influenced who we are, but we are responsible for who we become. That's you and I. We have to take it to that level of professionalism. So why is professionalism important? Here's the first thing: work relationships. If I were to purchase Girl Scout cookies and you have a ton of troops out there selling those things, you can't buy cookies from every troop that's out there. I love Girl Scout cookies as much as anyone else. But if I have a coworker who has a daughter who's in Girl Scouts selling the cookies, that's who I buy them from. It builds stronger work relationships, and people work better with folks they have a relationship with. The next thing is maintaining order and that there's a chain of command. A chain of command. It's important to understand there's a process in place. If you're a frontline worker and an issue comes up, the professional thing is to go to your supervisor to get that information, or to talk with them to work the thing out, not go directly to the president, CEO, because there's a chain of command. You should give your direct supervisor the opportunity to correct the issue before it gets to that level. The next thing is using appropriate and non-threatening conversation. You know that people go where they're celebrated, not where they're tolerated. Let me say that again. People go where they're celebrated, not just tolerated. Again, a part of that professionalism is that we're going to take care of one another and build strong relationships that will help us press in. And then finally, maintaining a hostile-free work environment. Work should be a place where we want to go, not have to go. Yes, the paycheck's great, but if you hate where you're going, you put out a terrible product. When we look at all of these things together, you'll find that it will reduce stress in the long run. There's a quote that I saw I thought was pretty interesting. I have it on the screen for you. Every time you stay out late, every time you sleep in, every time you miss a workout, and every time that you don't give 100%, you make it that much easier for me to beat you. That's work in a nutshell right there, professionalism. So let's now break these three categories or subcategories down into smaller pieces. So the first one is work etiquette. And that's the basic and common courtesy of things that we do for one another. So have you ever been on a phone and you're calling an agency and you can tell exactly the kind of mood that they're in? Hello, how can I help you today? And they really don't want to help you, right? So let me say this to you. When you answer the phone, proper etiquette is have a smile on your face. What that does is it changes the way you broadcast the information and how they receive the information. You're going to find out even if you're in a bad mood, by the end of the conversation, you're going to feel a little more lightened. The next thing is speakerphones. If you have someone on speakerphone, the etiquette thing is to make sure they understand you have them on speakerphone. Now, here's an example of that. Let's say a coworker calls you and they're just venting about something and they just want to get your input on it and you don't tell them that they're on speakerphone. And that individual is actually standing in the room with you. Well, you just created a hostile work environment without even knowing it. And then that individual will not want to be anywhere around you, which makes work difficult. So be sure that you let folks know you have them on speakerphone. Or if you're the one calling and someone's in your office, make sure you let them know that as well. Hi, Susie. This is Mr. Joseph. I have Jim with me here today. However you want to do that. But just make sure they understand there's more than just you on the line. The next etiquette thing is avoid lurking by doors, right? So sometimes we go to someone's office to get information or we need something and they're on the phone. The worst thing that you can do is just stand at the door lurking around waiting. A couple of things there. Number one, there may be some information that you should not be privy to, right? Confidentiality. And then the second thing is when you're lurking around, it puts an internal clock on the person on the phone and they rush through the phone call to get to you. So let's be fair to everyone. The next thing is emails and correspondence, how you respond to those. Now, avoid, let me back that up. Let me go back to the lurking by someone's door. I just thought of this one. When you're hanging by the door, we have a thing here in Oklahoma called Nunya. Have you ever heard of that? Nunya? Nunya business, right? Okay, so be sure to remember that. It's Nunya business. Okay, so emails and correspondence. Avoid using a lot of industry abbreviations because it can be difficult for folks who are not in your circle to understand what you're talking about. I just experienced that about a month ago. I was invited to a meeting in a virtual meeting like this. And this particular agency had other folks who do the same thing that they do, and they were speaking Greek. Lots of acronyms, and they were just throwing it left and right, and I couldn't make out half of the stuff they said. So here's an example. If you're here in Tulsa, if I said, is TPS allowed access into THA's PH properties during COVID-19? Or does TPD or HUD need to be CC'd using the CDC protocol? Now, many of you probably caught some of that, but let me read it back to you so that everyone can understand the lingo I just used or the jargon. Is Tulsa Public Schools allowed access into Tulsa Housing Authority's public housing properties during the COVID pandemic? Or does Tulsa Police Department or HUD, and most people understand HUD, need to be CC'd or copied on the CDC, or that's also known as the Center for Disease Control protocol? You see how very easily that can be misunderstood, make it difficult for people that you're working with to be able to answer questions because they're unsure of what you're asking? So try to avoid using a lot of that lingo, in addition to For crying out loud, use spell check. I am not the best speller, but I know how to push the button that says spell check. Now, the importance of that in professionalism is sometimes you'll have coworkers who need information from you. And you put together an entire array of information and you send it to them without proofing it. Then they're asked from another agency about, well, do you have this information? And they go, oh yeah, I just got it. And then they forward it on to another agency who then reads all the typos in the letter. A little embarrassing when it comes back. So be sure that you use your spell check. That will be very helpful for everyone in the long run. The second subcategory is integrity. Integrity. Now, as I'm speaking to motivational talks with varsity high school football players, I try to weave in these 3 R's for integrity. And the first one is reliable. It's important for them to be reliable. Attendance, back from lunch on time, meet their deadlines, return phone calls and emails in a timely fashion. Again, all things that we take for granted unless they're not in our subgroup. So we need to state that. The second R is being responsible. It's important to be responsible and do what you've been asked to do. No excuses. In addition to doing follow-up. Here's an example. I had a staff person who I needed to get information from another agency. And so I gave them a two-week window to get that information to me. So after 2 weeks, I go back to them and I say, hey, where's that information that I asked you to get for me? And they said, hey, when you asked me to get it, I sent them an email directly that day, and I haven't heard back from them. So if you know I need that information, why would you not call them back after about 3 or 4 days just to follow up? What that will do, it will help them. Let's say they're on vacation and they have a ton of emails. If you do the follow-up, you move to a higher level on them responding back to whatever you need. So be sure you do that follow-up piece as well. And then finally, the third R, being respectful and courteous. Here's the biggest one that I see. Guard your tongue. Be respectful and guard your tongue. How many of you know people out there who they say to you, I just shoot from the hip. I say what's on my mind. Just because it's on your mind doesn't mean you have to say it. I get things done. Well, yes, you get things done, but you leave a wake of bodies behind you that don't want to work with you after that. So the important thing is, yes, you can do that, but think before you speak. So guard your tongue. Maintain confidentiality. And then the last part in that respect is dress appropriately. Do you remember back in the early 90s when wearing pajama pants was really popular? Remember that? Well, back then I had a staff person who came to work and they were wearing SpongeBob SquarePants pajama bottoms. And I said, what are those? And they looked at me and said, it's the fad, everybody's wearing them. And I promptly said, go home and change. There's a professionalism that we need to maintain, and it's not wearing pajama bottoms. Now let's look at something that's more modern today. More modern meaning someone wearing jeans with the knees cut out, right? That is fashionable. It's a thing that's happening today. But for me, that's not professional. For you, possibly you might let that go. But for me, if it's my staff, I'm going to tell them they can't wear those to work. Again, totally up to you, but whatever and however you define your professionalism. Okay? And the third subgroup is work ethic. In work ethic, there are many facets to that. And the first one is credibility and trust. Credibility and trust. The person assigning things or tasks to you will not trust you enough to do things if you don't get them done on time. The more you get completed on time, the more they trust you, the more credibility that you'll have with them when they give you projects to work on. The next one is promotion. When you're doing the things you're supposed to do, it brings promotion with it. Meaning, if you're good at something, your supervisors notice that and they want others to do what you've done. And when that happens, you're promoted to a leadership position so you can teach others how you do it. So promotion typically will follow that. The third thing is future job references. You know that a good name is to be chosen rather than riches? Your name and reputation both follows and precedes you, whether you like it or not. Have you ever had someone from another department apply for a position that you have available in yours, and you already know the whole history behind them? Well, I'm not hiring them, right? Because of their reputation, the way they do things. They're not coming back from lunch. They're not turning in their timesheets, and you constantly have to bird dog them. So again, reputation is huge. And then earning bonuses and awards. You have to learn the rules of the game, then play better than everyone else. That's what Albert Einstein said. He's saying that once you learn how to do things and you can do it better than everyone else, bonuses come with that. That neat? And then there are some basic things called protocols that I'd just like to share with you. In these protocols, it's important to be on time. So let's say, I know none of you out there would be late, but let's say you come in late habitually. Guess what your staff will do? They too will start coming in late. So it's important to be on time, okay? The second thing there is if you're sick or late, you need to call in. Let somebody know what's going on. You call, not your mama, not your wife, not your husband. You call. That's integrity. You need to make the call. And then ask questions. If you don't know the answer to something, it's okay to say, you know, I've never thought of that. Let me look into that and I'll get back with you. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But trying to BS your way through things, people can read through that and you lose integrity. All right. So Stephen Furtick had a quote, and I thought that was pretty neat. And he says that the voice you believe will determine your future. There's a poem, let me read that, and then I'll move on to one more story. And then we'll get close to tying this thing together. A careful man I ought to be, a little fellow follows me. I do not dare go astray, for fear he'll go the selfsame way. I cannot once escape his eyes, whatever he sees me do, he tries. Like me, he says he's going to be that little fellow that follows me. I know I'm big and fine and believes in every word of mine. And I reckon I'm a better man than I used to be because I have this little fellow at home who thinks the world of me. Whether you want to be a mentor or not, you are. You're in a chosen field that helps the less and disadvantaged folks across the country and in your city. Not everybody can do this kind of work. So thank you for the work that you do. It's that important. If you've never heard anybody say that to you before, I'm saying it now. Thank you for what you do. I used to work at a park and recreation center in a low-income community area. And I had an enclosed gym, and most park and recreation centers stayed open until 9 p.m. Well, on the nights that I closed my center, I kept it open until 11 p.m. And the reason I did that was I'd much rather know where the kids in the neighborhood were doing something more constructive than just running amok. So that's what I did. Well, they used to just run games back and forth in the gym, and they would pick teams. And this particular evening, there was a young man. He was still in elementary school, kind of husky kid, slow, but no one would ever pick him to be on their team. So this particular evening, he walks out of the gym. He comes down, he sits in the foyer at a table outside my office. So I come out and I sit down at the table with him. He's got his arms folded and his head down on the table. And I said, you know what? When you're their age, they're still going to be doing the same thing day in and day out. But you're different. You're going to be the kid who's doing better than everybody else. Now, I'm a football coach. I think you're a football player, not a basketball player anyway. So what you need to do is learn the game and be better than everyone else. And what that'll do is you'll find a scholarship, you'll go to college, you'll get married, have a great job. Well, lost track of that kid. Other side of the story, my wife is a public school teacher, elementary school. And she works the PTA and does all the books and keeps everything in order, right? So usually on a Saturday, she would drive from where we live back downtown and deposit the money. And it's typically $200-300. Well, they had this huge event that raised a couple $1,000s. And when she said she was going to leave on a Saturday to deposit the money, I said, oh, no, you're not. I'm going with you. So I got in the car. We drove downtown. And it's a grocery store. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right? The grocery store with the bank in it, right? So we go to the grocery store, walk in the bank, 3 tellers at the front. And the teller way to the right is this huge, huge man, white shirt, tie, with this grin on his face looking at me. I was really uncomfortable with this guy staring at me. So I did what any grown man would have done. I hid behind my wife on the other side. Okay, I'm not too proud of that. But as we got closer to the front, I kept praying, please let us get the far left. Please get the far left. But the one that opened up was the one right smack in the center. And he was standing to my right. And he has this big grin on his face and he's looking at me. And so I had to look at him and, what's up? You know what I mean? And he said, you don't remember me, do you? And I said, I'm not sure. And he said, Coach? Now, I've been coaching for over 30 years. Coach is pretty broad. And then he mentions the Park and Recreation Center that I used to run for 3 years. And in that, his face now, I can see this little kid's face in his face. And then I call his name and he said, yep, that's me. I said, so what's been going on in your life? He said, you know, you told me that if I learned football and got better at it, I would get a scholarship. So I played in middle school, got pretty good, got in high school, got recognized by Missouri. So I started playing football in Missouri. Graduated, got a degree in business, got married, have a couple of great kids. And I want to tell you, thank you. Can you imagine? After, I haven't seen this kid since he was in elementary school. He's now a grown man with an entire family, self-sufficient, no longer in low-income communities. That's what you and I do. That's what we do. Don't lose sight of that. He looked at me and he said, here are 3 things that you taught me when I came to your recreation center. He said, the first one was, I learned to be on time. I had to be on time for practice, had to be on time for classes, had to be on time for my tutor. I had to have a tutor in college. I said, there's no shame in that. He said, the second thing you taught me was be consistent. It's important to be consistent. When you said the recreation center was going to be open, it was open. And I appreciated that. And the third thing is keeping your word. You told me a story about your kids as they were growing up. And this is him telling me. And he said, you said you went home and the kids said, Daddy, Daddy, can you take me to ice cream? And you said, I'll take you tomorrow. Well, when the next day came around, you had a very long day again and you were exhausted. You came in the doors and your boys immediately came running to you and said, Daddy, Daddy, take me to ice cream. You said. And you told me that, then you picked up your car keys and you took them for ice cream. It's important that we keep our word. Those are all things I think that are very important. I'm sure you have plenty of the same stories that I'm sharing with you. I've got a ton of them. But what happens is, as we're sowing seed into people and changing lives, we don't see it until years later. So sometimes it's difficult to handle. But I'm telling you, hang in there. That day will come if you haven't seen it already. I do have an activity for you to do. And I want you to take this seriously. Now, as a result of this session, you're going to start doing what? And then as a result of the session, you're going to stop doing what? And as a result of the session, you're going to keep doing what? Now, don't just scribble things down. I want you to think it through. I know it's late in the day, but try to think this through, because if all I've done is entertained you, I have not done my job. You need to take nuggets with you that you can apply in your daily life. So I'm going to start some music here, and when this ends, which will be about probably 6-7 minutes, we'll move on to the next thing and I'll close, okay? Okay. So what are some things, and go ahead and put it in the chat, our moderator there will be able to send those to me, unless you prefer to just speak, and that would be okay as well. We have a small enough group that it shouldn't be an issue. But I'd like for you to share with us something that you're going to start doing now. What are you going to start doing now? Okay. Okay, Kimberly, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, Tina, I love yours. I'm going to go ahead and just share that, because that's one of the things that many of us have a difficult time with, is procrastination, right? I used to be the king of procrastination. And the reason we do that is because there are things that we don't want to do, so we put it on the back burner, right? So one way that you can get past procrastination, because we can say it all day long, but how then do you do it so that you don't procrastinate, right? So here's what I do. The things that I don't like doing, like part of my job is paperwork, right? I don't like paperwork. I love doing teaching and outreach. So I will complete my paperwork first, and then I do the outreach stuff. That way, when I come into the next day, I'm not dreading I have paperwork to finish, because I've already done it, right? So that's a useful tool. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Going to keep plugging away. Good. Sheila. Okay. Very good. Good. Workouts keep clear mind. Yes, workouts do help. So what are we going to stop, or what are we going to keep doing? Keep doing. Okay. Tina, you have that you're going to start believing in your abilities and your skills. That's great. That's great. You know, many of us, when we get into these positions, we find that because of our backgrounds, sometimes we don't feel like we're worthy to do the job. We're not qualified to do the job. But let me tell you this, I have no issue with people who have their PhDs at all. But let me say this, if I have a successful mom raising 3 kids and they're all doing well, or you have a PhD who's never raised a kid in their life, but they've written a book about it, who are you going to listen to? A PhD or a single mom who raised 3 successful kids? I'm listening to the successful kids and the single mom because there's experience there. Each of us comes with experience from our life, and that's why we do the work that we do, right? Our backgrounds and circumstances may have influenced who we are, but we're responsible for who we become, right? So good job. I'm proud of that response. Thanks for what you do. Okay, Sheila's going to keep doing the best job serving people, the best to her ability, the best that she can. Absolutely true. Whether you want to be a mentor or not, as we talked about before, you are. People are watching the things that you do and they mimic it, right? So whether it's, here's a story for you. We were putting together a sports team for at-risk kids in our public housing sites. And we needed to put together coaches who are in maintenance, who are going to be the lead coach of taking the kids. Well, we had this one maintenance man, a lead maintenance man, who had daughters who went through the soccer program. Now, many of our kids didn't know back then much about soccer, but he had that in his experience, and he taught that skill to the kids in his community, and his team actually took the championship. Not that they were that much more outstanding in their ability, but they had a better understanding of the game. And all of that went back to a maintenance man who thought he was insignificant because all he did was fix things. But that changed how other kids saw programs, and to never give up. So that's great. Okay. So professionalism. Yeah, I do appreciate all the chats. If I didn't get to them, I apologize. But let me try to sum this up so that if we have other questions outside of this, we can talk more about that, okay? So professionalism, as I'm winding this down, remember, it's broken into 3 areas: etiquette, integrity, and ethics. And when you combine those 3, all 3 can be separate trainings, but those 3 things together make up the umbrella of professionalism. Again, what's professional to you may not be for another person, right? Okay, so let me end with this story. If I can get it to move. There it goes. Stuck. So this is called the turkey and bull parable. A turkey was chatting with a bull, and he said, "I would love to be able to get to the top of that tree, but I haven't got the energy to make it there." "Well," said the bull, "if you nibble on some of my droppings, it will give you enough nutrients to get to the top branch." The turkey started plucking and pecking at the lumps of crap and found that it actually gave him strength to get to the first branch. The next day, he started pecking away at the crap again and found that he was able to get to the second branch. And finally, after the third night, there he was, proudly perched at the top of the tree, where he was promptly spotted by a farmer who shot him out of the tree. Here's the management lesson. Bullcrap might get you to the top, but it won't keep you there, right? Okay, awesome. All right, I do have my contact information. Again, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me. There's my book. If you'd like to purchase it there, you can go online and do that as well. Again, I would love to come out and do trainings for you to raise funds so I can do more things in my community. Okay, so if there are other questions, again, we can go to chat. I know we're a little early. We got still about 15 minutes or so. Everybody good? All right, I guess we're good. Guys, I really appreciate either. Yeah, I really appreciate you hanging out with me today. Again, you're doing good work. You're doing great work in your communities. Keep plugging away, because you're affecting a whole bunch of lives. Since we have a little more time here, let me just give you one more story. When I was coaching third, fourth, and fifth graders, we used to have donors who have the, what do you call it, the savior complex, right? They feel like if I throw money at it, we can save all the kids in public housing. That's the worst way to do it. But anyway, I had somebody who had opera tickets, or not opera, symphony tickets, and said, Mr. Joseph, do you think your kids would love to listen to symphony music? And I said, yes, I'd love to expose them to something new. And so he gave me symphony tickets. I told the kids that if they did well in practice, I would take them to listen to some music. I didn't tell them what kind. I said music. They were stoked. Best practice I ever had. Loaded them up on the van, took them south, places where they've never been before, to this huge auditorium. I teach kids leadership skills, so the offensive person takes his line, defense takes their line, and they go out together. And then I follow or trail behind to make sure kids aren't running in the street, right? They're still kids. Then they get into this place, and they're looking at this huge area, and they're thinking, oh my gosh, this is huge. And they start running down the stairs towards, you know what I'm talking about? Those tickets aren't for down there. Those are expensive tickets, right? So I had to whistle, up here, guys. We're up there, nosebleed, right? So they come back up, and we go to the top. And we're sitting. Now, the tickets they gave us were along the back wall. Now, I wish they would have gave us a section so I could watch the kids, but they gave me the row all along the back. So I sat in the middle and had kids on my left, kids on my right, and the lights dim and come back on. And what does that mean? Typically means the show's getting ready to start, right? So one of the kids looked at me and said, Coach, someone didn't pay the light bill. And the people that were sitting around us started laughing at my kid. No, now you have to give me grace. In my early days, I was a little rough, right? So I had to explain to him, show was getting ready to start. And I looked at the person who said that, and I was like, you know what I mean, right? So then the lights dim again, and I said, when it does that again, we're going to start. The lights dim, and he says, Coach, we're getting ready to start now, right? I said, yes. The lights dim. It gets really quiet. The acoustic in the building is pristine. You can hear a pin drop, right? So then the orchestra conductor starts to walk out on the stage, and everybody starts to applaud. Well, my kids, they're looking at me like, Coach, he hadn't done anything yet. Why are they clapping? And I said, it's respect. So I started clapping, and of course the kids are elbowing each other going, come on, let's go, right? Well, it gets down, it starts to die down, and of course they're kids, so someone over here has to go get the last clap, and of course someone on the other end has to do the same thing to get the last clap, and then everybody in the section turns around, so you get that little, and they look up at us, and they go, shh, and I go, you shh, knock it off, turn around. And everybody turns around. The noise starts to settle back down and it gets quiet. The conductor then steps up with his baton and it goes tick, tick, tick. And we're in the nosebleed, so you know what kind of sound that is, right? Tick, tick, tick. Now, if you've ever sat in nosebleed section, that's where the critics sit. And it's where those desks are where that do this, and then they can have something to write on. You know what I'm talking about? That's where we're sitting. One of the kids is playing with that thing, and it slips out of his hand. And it goes, kaboom, boom, 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 boom. Oh my gosh. My heart is just racing at this point. Everybody in this section turns around. And I'm like, quit playing with stuff. Turn around. You. That was pretty embarrassing. And they all turn around. The conductor takes a couple of steps back and he waits. Then he approaches again. And then he lifts his baton and all of the instruments in unison. And the most beautiful music started coming out. Now I can tell you, the kids, they're looking at me now, and I can feel these darts just shooting at me. And it's like, Coach, you just tricked us. They'd never heard symphony music before. So I'm trying to groove with it, right? Like, yeah, this is good. Yeah, they're trying to mentor this thing. And then I can just feel the darts. And then pretty soon, one of the kids, he grabs the bottom of his chair because they're not the plush ones at the top, right? They're the rubber ones. And so he grabs the middle of his chair and he pulls it up and goes, and I'm thinking, wow, okay, this is good. The other kid pulls that desk thing back up again, pulls out a pencil from his back pocket, and he starts doing that. I can't do it. You know that little tap thing kids do with a pen, right? So he's doing that with it. And I'm thinking, this is great. They got it. Well, of course, everybody in our section. I'm like, guys, knock it off. Knock it off. And we start to listen. Well, intermission comes, and I've had about as much as I can take. And I'm like, guys, let's go. I'm ready to go. And so they start to stand up. Everybody in that section starts applauding. And the kids look at me and they go, Coach, they love us. I said, that is not why they're applauding you. And I stormed out and they followed me out there. We get all the way to the van and I gently open the door. Okay, that's a lie. I opened it pretty aggressively and I slammed the door and I said, you know that guy out there waving the stick? And of course, one of the kids said, oh, you mean the penguin with the stick? Yes, the penguin with the stick. He makes 3 times my salary waving a stick with an education. Now it got quiet. I open up the van doors, they get in. I take them home. Practice at 3, get out. Go to the next place. Practice at 3, get out. Well, I'm only telling you that story because one of the kids actually enjoyed the symphony music. He didn't want his buddies to know it was something different. He later on got a scholarship to play symphony music, and now has a degree. Again, I'm only telling you that story because it was the simple thing of me just taking him to a symphony, and it turned into a scholarship, which turned into a love of music, which turned into a whole different way of life. That's what you do. Again, I can't thank you enough. I grew up as an at-risk youth. I wish there were more people like you out there who care about my well-being and not just collecting a paycheck. So thank you again for what you do. Okay. So if there are no other questions, then I guess we can tie this up, and then I guess I'll speak with my moderator after this is over, see how we did. All right. Again, God bless you.